we talked about sort of general taxonomy, the science of taxonomy, dichotomous keys, what goes into binomial names, those sorts of things. We're going to now move into talking about some details about various kingdoms and the groups and what some of their characteristics and adaptations are, what some examples are. So we're going to move through some of these things, and we'll spend more time on some of these groups than others. Some we're just going to breeze by. So we're going to start with an overview today. So our modern classification system really puts all living things in one of 6 kingdoms that we just named. So let's just name them. So what kingdom would this be? Animals. Yeah, obviously. Now, I don't feel free to draw some shorts on this guy, if you'd like. He's not having a great day. He's not wearing any clothes. This fish is biting him in the side. Bird pecking at his head. This rodent is looking at him awkwardly. And then there's a snake. So yeah, feel free to draw on some clothes. I would feel better.
There's only 5 of them.
What? Yeah, I know. All right, another group that you're familiar with.
Plants?
Yeah, this is the plant kingdom. From, you know, a radish to a tree to a cactus, those are plants. I've been called this before.
Fungi?
Yeah.
Oh, I get it, fungi.
I am a fungi, Caitlin. Dad jokes. All right. This is a group. So now these are all probably, I would guess, things you're familiar with. And maybe you could have named before we went over them. Now, as we move on, these things might be less familiar. This group is a group called the protists. And we'll talk about them today and later in the week as well. Protists are single-celled organisms. There's a wide variety of them. Some you may have heard of. This group are actually 2 things. They're kind of hard to draw because they're very small. They're microscopic. These are bacteria. And we're also going to use this box for archaea. So archaea are often sort of in middle school kind of glossed over. They're relatively recently discovered. Okay? Obviously, people have known about animals and plants and fungi for a long time. Protists, scientists didn't really start to categorize until microscopes were invented because they're typically microscopic. Same thing with bacteria. And then archaea were found much later. They were first discovered in sulfur springs in sort of extreme conditions, and we'll talk about some of that. So when we talk about these kingdoms, we're going to come back to sort of 3 main criteria as we talk about these. And these are sort of big distinctions between various kingdoms. So when we talked about cells, animal and plant cells, we drew complex cells, they had a nucleus and all these other organelles. However, not every type of living organism has a nucleus in its cell or other organelles. There are some cells that lack a nucleus and other membrane-bound organelles. So we have some words for them. The words are prokaryote and eukaryote. What does the prefix pro mean? Like the prologue of a book. Yeah, the beginning. It comes sort of before like the actual chapters start. That prefix pro means before. The prefix eu means true. And then the root karyote means something having to do with the nucleus of the genetic material. So prokaryotes. Yeah, so what do you think that means? Yeah, that's what it like literally translates into. So what do you think prokaryotes have or don't have? Yeah, they don't have the nucleus. So these are really pretty simple cells. They don't have a nucleus in them. Instead, their DNA is in the cytoplasm, just kind of floating there. They don't have mitochondria. They don't have chloroplasts. They don't have ER or Golgi bodies. So they are a much simpler cell. Typically, they're much smaller as well.
So do they have a nucleus or no?
They don't have a nucleus or a nuclear membrane. They still have DNA, but it's not surrounded in a nucleus.
If they're very simple, have like no nucleus, they can't really do anything. What's the purpose of it?
Well, they can do things. They can stay alive and carry out all the life processes, and they're really actually important. We'll talk about why in a minute. So that's prokaryotes. The one way to remember it, because sometimes people mix them up, pro rhymes with no. Prokaryotes have no nucleus. Eukaryotes, U rhymes with do, because eukaryotes do have the nucleus. They're more complex cells. They typically have other organelles as well, like mitochondria and chloroplasts. When we studied cells back several weeks ago, we were really talking about eukaryotic cells. Good?
So, for the prokaryote, what it means like before the nucleus, does it mean like that cell existed before the nucleus?
Yeah, it means really prokaryotes evolved. They were the first life to evolve on Earth. Very simple cells. Eukaryotic cells evolved later on, and you'll learn in ninth grade about sort of how that happened. So we start, one thing we look at when we're talking about the kingdoms is, do they have a nucleus or not? Are they prokaryote or eukaryote? Questions about that part?
Are these cells or the nucleus?
Yeah, those represent cells. Like here is a cell with the DNA in the nucleus, and here's one without. They're kind of just a simple model.
I don't have a question.
Okay. All right. So the next one, the other criteria we look at is how many cells are they made out of? Are they unicellular or multicellular? And you could probably guess what those terms mean. What do you think unicellular means?
One cell.
Yeah, one cell. It's an organism that's just a single cell. And multicellular? Yeah, they are made of many cells. The third criteria we will analyze is how they obtain their nutrition or their energy. And these are terms you've heard of. Some organisms are autotrophs, some are heterotrophs. Do you know what those terms mean? Mitchell?
Autotroph make their own food and heterotroph don't.
Yeah. So the root troph means something having to do with food. Auto means, what does auto mean? Like, yeah, automatic. Something happens by itself. It means self. So self-feeding. Yeah, these are organisms that make their own food. What process do you think they used to do this? Correct, photosynthesis. Examples, grass and flowers and other plants. There's some other things as well that we'll talk about. The prefix hetero means other. So other feeding. Heterotrophs, where did they get their energy? Yeah, by eating, by consuming other living organisms. They can't make their own food. They have to consume things to get energy. Like an ant, or a human, or a mushroom, or a lobster. We'll talk about that today. So we're going to look at these three criteria for each kingdom now. All right. We'll start with the most familiar. Animal kingdom. So thinking about these three categories, tell me about their nucleus. Thinking back to our cells unit, what would we call things in the animal kingdom? Olympia? They are eukaryotes because they They do have a nucleus, correct. Oh, shoot. They are also you guys are smart, wow. They're also multicellular. What about their nutrition? Caitlin? They are heterotrophs. They have to eat other organisms to get energy. And we are in this group, obviously. So we are multicellular. We're made of trillions of cells. All of our cells, have organelles in the nucleus. We are heterotrophs. We have to consume other organisms in order to get energy. Now, if you think about identified species, the animal kingdom is the largest. Do you think that's because on Earth there's more animal species than anything else?
No, maybe.
So far, we've identified more animal species, but what might be another explanation for that?
There's 7 billion humans.
Well, now I'm not just talking about the number of individuals, but number of different species. Jake?
One might be we haven't explored on the ocean.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Something else, Jake?
Maybe some of the, because we would wall one on it.
I don't know. Jack?
We haven't started working the world, so some places have possible new life.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting your. Why is it easier to discover animals?
Because
Because they're very ancient. Oh! I think that shit.
No. William?
Because they're always like mutating and making.
No, everything is. It's sort of more obvious, I think.
That's
Sophia? They're big and they're moving, right? So animals are larger species. We can see them with the naked eye. For us to identify a new species of bacteria, how do we identify new bacteria? We have to use a microscope and so forth. So animals, it's easier because they're larger, they're more apparent.
and you have to spend money to buy a microscope.
Yeah, and humans sort of focus on things that we can see and we can sort of relate to. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's more animal species than there are bacteria species. Scientists have just discovered and named more of them.
Can I go please get a drink by
Yeah. So examples. Just some common examples: spider, penguin, cat, sponge.
Penguin, fun.
Yeah. These are animals.
Sea sponge.
Yep. All right, the next group, plants. This is obviously another one I'm sure you know a lot about. Raise your hand if you can tell me. What about cells? The number of cells. Danielle? Yeah, they're multicellular. What about their nucleus? What do you think we could fill in for plants? Right? Eukaryote, correct. We saw the nucleus of plant cells when we were looking at the onion cell under the microscope. Faith, how about nutrition? They are autotrophs, correct. Plants are autotrophs. They make their own food by the process of photosynthesis, by using the sun's energy to make glucose. So lots of examples that you're familiar with. We'll just list a few.
Why is that one not big?
I don't know. Does that bother you?
Yeah. There's one for the.
Can you change it?
No. It's fine. Helping you get over your... All right, now we start to get into some things maybe we are less familiar with. So fungi. So fungi examples, I'll tell you some examples are what? Mushrooms. There's some other things maybe you're You might not know.
Is lichen a fungi?
Lichen is like a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and a trosis. It's a little complicated. Maybe you learned about this organism in home and careers. Mold is, yes.
It is?
E. coli.
Staphylococcus.
No.
I'm so
What? You may have used this in your cooking.
Oil.
Yeast?
Yes, yeast. So, some fungi are actually unicellular. Others are multicellular. Yep. They are eukaryotes, so they have complex cells. What do you think about nutrition?
They make
Olympia? How do you know this? So what does it mean if they're heterotrophs?
They get food from something else.
What? Do mushrooms get food from something else?
Yes, because they have like so there's like the mushroom on top and then the thing underground and it like no
They're
it's
not
like
technically roots, but go ahead, Mike. I
and
like
then they
roots.
like they get like their nutrients from things in the
Yeah,
ground.
yeah, they are heterotrophs. Another factor, they have a cell wall. We also call them decomposers. What does it mean to decompose something? Caitlin?
It means to like break down.
Yeah, to break it down. That's what mushrooms do, as well as bacteria, is they break down dead organic material or waste material, and that's what they use for their nutrients. They have cells with a cell wall, but it's a different type of cell wall than plants had. What was a plant cell wall made out of? Cellulose. Fungi cell wall is not made of cellulose. It's made of another material called chitin.
They some bugs have this. Oh,
Yeah, yes. It makes exoskelets for lots of insects as well. It's a type of carbohydrate. That's your name?
Yeah.
I'm gonna call you chitin for now.
Yes.
Okay? Chitin all.
It's like
All right, so examples, you guys said yeast.
yeast.
And we'll talk more about these mushrooms, molds, mildew, slime. Yeah. Why? Oh, sorry, don't look at that. All right, protists, probably something you're not very familiar with. Protists are
Unicellular.
unicellular,
So small.
so single-celled organisms. They are also, though, eukaryotes, so they still have organelles in their cells. And actually, some protists are autotrophic, some are heterotrophic. Some can actually do both in one organism. We will possibly look at some protists under the microscope this week. And some examples, the ones we might look at, Euglena is a protist that lives in fresh water, and it has chloroplasts in it. So what do you think it can do? It also can consume other organisms if it doesn't have light available. So it's one organism that can be both an autotroph and a heterotroph.
Ultimate food
Sort of.
system.
A paramecium, have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I talk about it a lot.
Yeah. Paramecium is a protist. An amoeba.
Oh, you said that.
Yeah. An amoeba is a protist as well. Those are three common ones that we might look at this year. Yeah, Balthazar?
So why couldn't scientists find this at first?
What's that?
Why couldn't scientists find this at first?
They're small single-celled organisms. Typically you find them in fresh water. Like if you ever go behind your house to a pond or a stream, sample some of the water, put it on a slide, look at the microscope, you are probably going to find some protists in there. So microscopes needed to be invented before scientists really studied these. Another kingdom, bacteria. So what about number of cells? Raise your hand if you want to take the guesses. How many cells would you find in a bacteria? Layla? Yeah, they're unicellular. What do you think about their nucleus? Raise your hand. Wyatt? What's that? They're not. They're actually the other group. They are prokaryotes. So raise your hand if you could remind me what this means. Kayan.
They have
Prokaryote.
no.
Pro rhymes with?
No.
No, because they have no nucleus. How about nutrition? They actually can be both. So there are autotrophic bacteria, and there are heterotrophic bacteria. So some you might be familiar with. Yeah, you guys probably learned about several of them in health class. E. coli. Does anybody know anything about E. coli?
Oh, I do.
Hold on. One at a time, Max. Hold on.
Stands for elephant.
Balthazar?
It's like food poisoning.
Okay, can cause food poisoning, but there are also many types of E. coli that live in our digestive tract, helping us to break down certain compounds in our food. So we have beneficial bacteria. They're called our gut microbiota that help us in our health. Can anyone give me another example of a specific bacteria? Sophia? Stands for Staphylococcus. Yep, we'll learn about why it's called that and what that means.
Is that its scientific name?
Yes. What about another one?
Salmonella.
Salmonella.
Botulism.
Okay.
Red tide.
Well, that's caused by a type of bacteria. Streptococcus, strep throat. These are all types of, cyanobacteria. These are photosynthetic bacteria that can make their own food. Why? No, cancer is one's own cells. Not a bacteria, but it's one's own body cells reproducing out of control. That's what cancer is. Cancer is one's own body cells that have lost their ability to control their cell division.
Really? And then they just get big.
And then they form tumors and they get moved from one part of the body to another and cause all sorts of problems. All right, and finally archaea. So archaea are going to seem like they're very similar to bacteria. In fact, when they were first discovered, scientists just thought they were a type of bacteria. But since they started studying them more closely, they found they are actually not. Okay? So they're in a different kingdom, and they're actually in a different domain. So archaea are unicellular, prokaryotic. They're autotrophic. And some of these first archaea were discovered in what we call extreme conditions. They're called extremophiles. They can live in extremely acidic environments. They can live in hot springs, in this sulfur at deep sea vents. So they can survive very, very dry conditions. They can survive very salty conditions. And what's that? No, but we've since found, or scientists have since found, that they actually live all over the place. But we didn't really know much about them. They live in our bodies. They live in basically every ecosystem. But they were first discovered in these extreme conditions. Things like thermophiles, we call them. They live in very, very hot conditions, which other living things probably couldn't survive. Things that live in acidic conditions. Olympia?
How many do we know?
3. We'll talk about them in the next slide. So let's finish up here. All right, let's see if we can do this. Cover up the top slide with your hand or your binder. Let's see if we can do this. All right. Oh. All right, let's go across. Let's go across the top. How do they obtain food? First of all, raise your hand and tell me what two terms are we going to be filling in here? Raise your hand. Olivia? Yeah, either heterotroph or autotroph. All right, animals. Raise your hand. We're raising our hand. We're not shouting out answers. Maya? Heterotroph. Yeah, that's fine. How about, again, raise your hand. Plants. Wyatt?
Autotroph.
Autotroph. Fungi. Jake? Heterotroph. Protists. Mitchell? Both. Bacteria. Olympia? Both. And archaea. Danielle? Autotroph. Number of cells. Raise your hand and tell me. What are the terms we're going to be using here in number of cells? Raise your hand. Faith. Or multicellular, or what's the other term we're going to be using? Just in general. What is the other one? So multicellular versus unicellular. So animals, raise your hand. Animals, number of cells. Chitin. Multicellular. Plants. Maya. Multicellular. Fungi. I'll take that as my hand up. Sage. Kind of? Leo? Both. There are some that are unicellular, there are some that are multicellular.
I get it. Okay.
Protists. William. Unicellular. Bacteria. Sophia. Unicellular. Archaea. Faith. Unicellular. All right, prokaryote or eukaryote. So, tell me what it means. First, what is a prokaryote? Olivia.
It doesn't have a nuclear membrane.
Does not. No nucleus. What does eukaryote mean? Does have a nucleus. All right, animals, Olympia. Eukaryote. Yes. Plants. Maya. Eukaryote. How about some people I have not heard from today and raising their hand? Max. How about fungi? Eukaryotes. Maddox, how about protists? No, they're eukaryotes still. Bacteria. Rockford. Prokaryote. Devin. Archaea. Prokaryote. Yeah. So, you guys asked me earlier about how many domains there are. What was my answer? 6 kingdoms, 3 domains. Can you guess which of these kingdoms are going to be together in one domain? Mitchell?
All of them besides bacteria and archaea.
Yes. All of these are in the domain called eukarya. Can you guess why they're in that domain? They're all eukaryotes. Then there is a domain separate for bacteria
Is it pro?
and a domain separate for the archaea.
Is it called the Archaea domain?
Yes.
It is.
Yep. And it's called the kingdom as well. Kind of weird.
Are we done for today?
We are done with our notes for today. Any questions? So listen, since I will not be here tomorrow, here's what's going to happen just so you know. You'll answer a question. I'm going to have the sub show you a video all about taxonomy. And then to finish, the keys for the fish, the pictures are up here. You can get a key. You can finish up with the fish. It is due on Thursday. If you do finish, I have one more practice key about salamanders you can work on as well. The fish will be graded.